Hey, Livingston Education, I'm Mike Raymer, and thanks for tuning in and joining us for our ongoing series of live education-oriented programs. You know, we have so many accomplished residents in Livingston and talented members of this group, and we want to continue to use this platform to showcase all the amazing things happening in the education space in town. And that includes highlighting Livingston residents and the great things you are doing. So today, backed by popular demand, is Livingston dad and author Jason Shapiro, who has recently published his fourth book, Lunch with Larry. What's amazing is that Jason has written and published all 4 of his books in less than 2 years. So before we begin, I wanted to mention to everyone watching, let's all use this interactive format. Chime in anytime, ask questions, and comment in the live stream. So Jason,
thanks for having me back, Mike.
Yeah.
You know, we were just saying a lot's happened in 2 years. With the pandemic, it's so good to be here in person. Zoom worked well for everybody out there, but there's nothing like being in the same room with somebody and having a conversation.
I agree. Welcome back, and thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
So let's start off by reviewing each of your books, your 4 books.
Let's do it.
And give us a quick little synopsis of each, and then of course the focus will be on Lunch with Larry. So the first book that you wrote, Magic of Mayfair, right?
So the Magic of Mayfair was, I always say that's going to forever have my heart, almost like your first kid. It was, we say there's a difference between being sloppy and scrappy, and this was scrappy. This was me writing this from the heart. No experience being a writer at that point, really grassroots. And it's a story about growing up in the 1980s and experiencing, from my perspective, what it was like being a child and all the nostalgia of being a child. Again, growing up in the 1980s, I like to say it was the last great decade to be a kid. I'm sure everybody says that about the decade they grew up. But it's a story also about how things change. And you go from my childhood into my adulthood, where life becomes a roller coaster, and I'll probably say that quite a bit since my books have a very similar theme around overcoming life challenges, but really going through the ups and downs of my adulthood. And I won't give the book away, but it really kind of takes you on a journey from the good times to the bad, and then really full circle.
Yeah, I love the story. I love the book. Highly recommended.
Thank you.
If you have a chance.
Yeah, I will say this one has definitely got a Stand By Me, the Goonies type of vibe to it. So if anybody out there likes that.
After I read it, I said, hey, Jason, this is the Wonder Years.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it reminds me. So, great. So your second book, interesting, a little different from the first, right?
Yeah.
Brian, My Pet Lion.
Yeah.
Tell us about that one, Jason.
So Brian, My Pet Lion is a story about a child overcoming fear and anxiety. This is a story about the reader sees the story unfold through the eyes of a child. So you are kind of under the impression that this boy went to the pet store and got a lion as a pet, and at the end of the story you find out that it was a lion only because this boy was so terrified and afraid. And this was actually inspired by my own son, who did have a fear of our pet cat. So this is a story that I hope will help open up dialogue with children and parents about their feelings.
And children's book, for what ages is this appropriate?
I've read this. I've done school readings, 2nd through 4th grade. I think that's probably the sweet spot there in regards to the ages.
Super,
Yeah.
super. And your third book, also very interesting, more like The Magic of Mayfair, your first book,
Yeah.
The Magnificent Mind of Ostaf.
Yeah, so this one was one of the most fun books I was able to write, or had the opportunity to write. It's a story about, and everyone has somebody possibly in their family that's kind of a little bit of an outcast, a misfit. And it's a story about this wacky, crazy, outcast gadget inventor that nobody believes in, and he ends up inventing something that changes the world.
And he was your uncle.
Inspired by my uncle.
Inspired by your uncle,
Yep.
Larry. Or no, Ostaf
Ostaf
is your uncle.
Well,
Larry.
that's a made-up name, but it is inspired. All my books are inspired by some sort of life experience.
Yes, we'll talk more
Yep.
about that. And of course today,
Yep.
we're here to discuss your fourth book, Lunch with Larry.
Yep.
Dallas, give us a quick synopsis. We're going to do a
Yeah.
deep dive on many different, but tell us, Larry, of course.
Yeah, Larry's my father. So the subtitle, this I really felt passionate about having a subtitle, a second chance to say goodbye. This is the story, you know, I like to say that I've always been a problem solver, and I lost my dad in 2013. But the way that I lost him, and we'll talk about, you know, in depth, but I needed to figure out a way where I could meet him one more time to say goodbye. And I knew that by being a writer, you can create your own reality. And that's what I did. Through my writing, I was able to have one last lunch with my dad, did a lot of research with friends and old bandmates and people that knew him in high school to help me fill in the gaps. And when I was done, I had jotted down pages, Mike, of information from all these people. And before I had started writing, I had the blueprint of my next book.
Interesting, interesting. So all your books, Jason, again, very prolific here. 2 years. I think that's just incredible to publish 4 books in 2 years. But tell us, there's a common theme, right? I mean, these books all touch your heart.
Yeah.
But give us, and they come from your life experience, right?
Yeah, and it's not pre-planned. When I wrote The Magic of Mayfair, you know, I want to normalize conversation about going through life challenges, and if you believe that life challenges can impact your mental health, I always say then it's not a 1 in 5, it's a 5 in 5 statistic. We all go through life challenges, and we all have, we've all had, you know, different variations of mental health ups and downs in our life, and this helps me. It comes from a place of almost self-therapy to write all of these books. And really that's why you see that common theme is because really ultimately I'm writing about the things that I've experienced, and for me personally it helps me deal with those situations better.
So let's dive a little more deeply into that theme, mental health. Just quickly, Magic of Mayfair, your brother.
Yeah,
right?
So you know I decided when I wrote The Magic of Mayfair, it came with a lot of self-disclosure. You know, my brother was diagnosed with schizophrenia in 1998, lost my childhood best friend in 2005. You'll find out a little bit about my father, what happened to him. So in honor of, you know, my childhood best friend and my brother, I want to normalize conversation about it. For years, Mike, I would tell people that my brother, you know, he was, you know, dealing with alcoholism or things of that nature, because I didn't want to, that old mentality, you know, this can't leave the 4 walls of the house. You know, this has to stay, very old school way of thinking. And when we can bring those discussions out into the open, we can help each other. And what happens is when you talk about these experiences, someone else says, my sister had schizophrenia, and here's what we did, and have you tried this, or maybe think about that. So that's just one example. Could be many, many variations of mental health challenges.
And Brian, my pet lion, is really
Deals with anxiety.
Deals with anxiety.
Yeah.
Children's anxiety. Talk just a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, I saw the anxiety and fear that my own child was dealing with, and I dealt with as a child. Many children do at the time. Looking back as an adult, and you know, at the time I didn't know what it was because we didn't really talk about it in school. It was academics. That was the structure. So what I'm trying to do is go into schools, read my book, and really challenge everybody out there to say, hey, listen, academics is absolutely critical, but we need to have the framework first of everybody feeling good mentally and physically.
And so what's the foundation, Brian, my pet lion? Is it's okay to be scared? Is that part of
it? And also to normalize it. And when I read this book to classes, the amazing thing is that the first person, when I say, hey, has anybody out there ever been scared or nervous or worried? And the first child raises their hand, and you know what happens after that? The next one, and the next one, and the next one. And everybody starts to say, I was afraid or scared the first time I played t-ball, or when I went on a roller coaster, or one time I lost my mom. I was scarred. You know, these things can be scarring for children. I couldn't find my mom. We were at the movie theater, and I got lost. So whatever it is, it opens up the dialogue and really creates, again, it's being normal to discuss this stuff.
Acknowledging your feelings and being able to communicate that. Such a wonderful release.
And I believe that, you know, my childhood best friend I use as an example, who passed away in 2005, as I said, what if it had been normal for him to talk about the way that he was feeling 15 years ago, you know? And that's what I think it's so important at a young age that everybody, children understand that not only is it normal to feel a certain way, but it's acceptable to speak about it.
Yes.
So
Wonderful.
yeah.
Great mission, Jason. And again, delving in on the magnificent mind of Ostaf with that mental health component.
Same thing. So Ostaf in this story, you know, it goes to show you that somebody that has mental health struggles can still do great things. Don't give up on them. You know, always keep them, you know, in your prayers and support them and love them. And there's a story where no one believed in Ostaf, and you know, he had one nephew that is the main character in the story that did believe in him, and it shows what the power of love is when somebody's going through life challenges and how that can change somebody's life that is going through tough times.
So let's talk about Lunch with Larry.
Let's do it.
So Larry, you introduced Larry in The Magic of Mayfair, and we read about him again in some ways in The Magnificent Mind of Ostaf. So you really do so well.
I think he made an impact on me.
You really paint the picture of what Larry is like.
Yeah.
And your character development in all the books, I think, is excellent.
Thank you.
So I got a real sense of who he's like.
Yeah.
Paint the picture for us.
Yeah.
Do it for Larry, your dad. Give us a visual on it.
Yeah.
You know, just to give that imagery.
Well, it's funny you say visual. So if you see the cover here, and I'll get into the cover later because there's a lot of symbolic things happening.
Please,
but you can see right in the cover, he's all engaged in the conversation. You know, listen, a lot of parents, right? Bigger than life, no social filter. I think that's the easiest way to describe him. You know, whatever he was thinking, he said. My kids tend to say that I've inherited some of those traits, even though I always say you know, as much as I loved my dad, I would try to kind of deviate from some of the things that embarrassed me, but apparently I haven't done a good job. But also somebody that led by example, you know, didn't sit down and have conversations about life and things that you need to do. He demonstrated. He led by executing on what needed to be done. So growing up, I have three younger brothers. We all watched my dad do these things. Get up at 4 a.m, go travel the country. Back then there was no Zoom calls, right? So you had to be at every appointment in person. But he set the groundwork in regards to this is how you execute in life, whether it be your career, whether it be taking care of a family. And the biggest thing I said about my dad, you know, in this book, and you know, just to get a sense, he gave us security as a child and kind of took control of everything. So like a lot of people's parents, far from perfect. However, as an adult looking back now and writing this book, I really can appreciate the great things that he did.
And I'm wondering, all the viewers watching, if they have a parent like this. I have a parent like this. My mom, big personality, social filter has moderated over time. But she's a larger than life personality, very salesy, like your dad.
They've always got the greatest idea, the best. It's always the best,
always
the
selling.
biggest. It's fantastic, you know. So
give us more of a visual of your dad. I'm just curious. Did he have gray hair? Did he how tall he was? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, and if you want to hold that up, that's him. Sure. That's literally the artist actually got a really good picture of him in there. And in this book is a whole collage of photos of my dad. But yeah, I mean, as the years went on, the hair got grayer, right? Like all of us. Yeah, you know, definitely wasn't a fashionista. You know, wasn't wearing the latest. He had back in the '80s. He had the big thick glasses, and the polo shirt was his daily outfit with khaki pants. Growing up in Florida, didn't matter if it was 100 degrees out. He always wore this outfit in the cover. In fact, that's the last outfit he wore when I saw him.
And you grew up in Florida, right?
Yep.
And then of course you have your own family, your own kids, children, and moved here to Livingston. About how long ago?
8 years.
8 years ago, So let's talk about the book. Jason, I think you really set the table so well here. There's so much, and I have a few points. But this first sentence in the preface, how about this? How well do you know the people you love? That gets to the heart of this whole book. So in essence, and we'll talk about how you set it up in the place, but you're interviewing your dad.
Yeah.
You've gotten this last opportunity to learn about him and to discover things that you would like to know for your own, what would you say, for your own peace of mind, for your
my own peace
closure?
of mind and closure, absolutely. Absolutely, and thank you for highlighting that. And if you notice, the preface is very, very small.
Yes.
Because ultimately, at the end of the day, yeah, we know people because we live with them.
Yeah.
But really, outside of being able to name their favorite restaurant or vacation destinations or things of that nature, how often do we sit down with the people that we love and really ask them questions?
Right.
Tell me about you, you know, and really dive into the depth of who people are. And everybody's guilty because we're doing 5 million things a day. You know, at the end of the day, everybody's kind of in relaxation mode. But yeah,
and if there's a specific message to this book, that rings loud and clear.
Yeah.
And it's inspiring, Jason, to really sit down, whether it be loved ones, with our parents or our siblings, and ask them about themselves, what's important to them, how they feel, and truly getting to know them as people, because life is so hectic. But let's talk about the book. So it's the cover, which they did such a remarkable job. It looks like it's you.
It's me.
And you're writing, it's you. You're talking in the first person in the book.
Yep.
And it's set in a deli. Now, you don't mention the deli.
Right.
But in New York City, a deli in New York City. But I imagine I know the deli because I've been there. Yeah. In the book, you call it Max's Deli. Can we name what deli I think it is?
Go for it.
It's got to be Katz's
It is.
Deli.
It is
got to be
Katz's.
Katz's
It is
Deli.
Katz.
And it is world-class,
Yeah.
incredible deli. And I think, again, the imagery you use food.
Yeah.
Right? Tell us about the food that your dad likes.
It was important. I mean, when I thought about the setting of this book, where was I going to meet my father, who passed away in 2013? It was a diner, a deli. Yes. This was his favorite place. This was his favorite food. And you know, I want everyone out there to kind of, when I talk about this, I really wrote this as if I was truly meeting him for lunch. All the details, exactly what would happen. So I know what his favorite thing, and I've always said, you know, if you know Larry Shapiro, I wrote this in the book, a nice meal would always make him happy. And whether it be corned beef, roast beef, something with beef in it, and his celery soda, and his cheesecake, and his side helpings of coleslaw.
Right, you're very detailed. And you ordered for him, and he came in, and so you're going through this process of interviewing your dad for this last time, and you ordered the food for him. And the reader doesn't necessarily know until the end, because you're so engrossed with help me here. With discovering the questions that you ask, and discovering him.
So really, the concept of this book, I wanted it to be something complete. I mean, I didn't really think about this when I was writing. It's just the idea came to me, and I really love the idea. So ultimately, I show up at this diner deli to write a book. And we'll talk about the waitress that I become friendly with. But ultimately, the reader, and I don't want to give everything away, but the reader believes that really this is, like you said, in the first person, my father's coming, I'm having this great time with him. But then at the end, you find out that, you know, the tables were turned a little bit. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but yeah, I really set it up from the very beginning as my dad comes walking into the door. When I'm writing this, you know, anyone out there that's lost somebody, even talking about, let alone writing about you seeing this person again, and talk about emotional for anybody out there that's lost someone, and even more deep is you didn't get to say goodbye to somebody. Never got to say goodbye to my father. We lost him in a car accident. It was at my house the day prior. So the positive was it was a sudden impact, and I say positive because he didn't suffer. The negative was I never got a chance to say goodbye to him. So you can imagine how just emotional but also rewarding it was to have him come walking through the door again. You know, 8 years later.
Right. But it was set up in terms the book itself. You knew you set up time. Again, you're in your mind, you had this opportunity to meet him one last time. And throughout the book, there's a flow to the book. You go through the different decades, if I remember correctly. Your dad was born in 1947.
Yes.
So you talk about the 1950s. You talk about the 1960s, the 1970s, 1980s, right?
Yeah, and I thought that would be, I also wanted to keep it universal to where other people that didn't know my dad would find the book engaging. So we do go through all the decades, and my dad was a big history buff, so I wanted him to weave in history of what he lived through. So, we talk about the ending of, World War II in the late 40s, and then really we dive into the 1950s when he was a child and what that was like, and he goes into depth in the book, and we talk about really everything that you would remember if you grew up in the 50s. And we talk about the 60s, we talk about the heartaches too of that time with the Vietnam War and what it was like. And this is just from doing my research of interviewing people that knew my dad, but also finding out about this time was the anxiety. You talk about anxiety as a college student having to deal with possibly being drafted into the war. And we talk about that as well, because I know that was something that impacted him, and I found out through other people that it really did cause him a lot of anxiety and stress. He never talked about it. So these were some of the things I found out from other people. So I was learning as I was writing.
And a number of the elements that you do, and you've done so well in your other books, some of the writing elements, you have a gray box. And almost as if you're talking, here's one, as if you're talking to yourself and reflecting on what's occurring, which I think is a wonderful, interesting element that flows through your books. But also what strikes me, which I really enjoy, and you're discovering, is the advice that Larry gives you through time. And it's closure over time. And it's emotional, Jason, and it's a wonderful thing when a parent, if you could have that extra opportunity, and for the parent to say, it's okay, you'll be okay, son. So I have a number of points in the book, but these are that struck me. Larry reminds Jason, having children is a gift. I know you understand that, but it is what life is all about. Your legacy is what you leave behind once you exit this world. They will carry that on with you. I know you're ambitious and a go-getter, but always try and balance your time as best you can. And you get into that, and to hear it from your dad's voice, to recognize that in the end, try to live in the present and create balance, and that time is the gift. And many of us know this, Jason, but to hear it from you and to give points to it, it's a wonderful. It's interesting. I had a number of questions for you. What's the best advice your dad gave you? We can go, the different points in the book here.
But you bring up, I'm glad you highlighted that. One thing that I think is noteworthy to mention is we all know in our heart where we can do a little bit better job. I always like to say, for the most part, everybody does the best they can. I don't know if it was my dad kind of being channeled through me or it was my subconscious, but these were the things that I anticipated that my father would tell me, and perhaps what I needed to hear as I wrote this book. So I think it was a combination of all of those. And I was very honest with myself when I wrote it, knowing I'm not holding back. I know as much as I try to be successful in anything I do, there's a lot of opportunity that I have.
Where the learning comes from reading and internalizing this. As our children call us in the middle of a busy workday, or our elderly parents call us when we're hectic and running around, the natural response might be, you're listening with one ear and you're doing, but to put things aside and really truly listen to them and to speak with them and because in the end, you only know what you don't have until you don't have it anymore.
Exactly.
I'll get to that toward the end. I want to ask your views and advice on that. So it's really, I think you touch on some wonderful advice. Another quick passage here. that your dad is telling you, but it's your voice and you've learned about it. He says, there are ups and downs, right? In the end, relationships with people are what make living so special. The bonds and connections we have with each other. And then he continues on. It's funny, because even though I have accomplished some great things, your being proud of me is the best accolade I could ever have. Actually, you said that.
Yeah.
You said that, so I skipped forward in that book. But you feeling that you know that your dad was proud of you. In the end, Jason, I think us humans crave that from our parents at any age, don't you think?
Yeah, you know, that was, you know, unfortunately, since my dad's passed, Mike, it's been 8 years, and man, has life changed for me dramatically. And no matter how old I get, I don't know if everyone else out there agrees, but just hearing from your father or your mother, no matter how old you are, that they're proud of you.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I try not to get emotional, but it's important, you know. And at the end of the day, I needed to hear that now, 8 years later, that he was proud of me. And the only way I could get that to happen was to write this book.
And there you continue with that thought a couple pages later. You were my first, he's saying this to me. You were my firstborn, the guy who made me a father. I was proud of you the day you were brought into the home from the hospital. Pride isn't calculated by the number of achievements you have in life or the amount of money you make. You can't take your material possessions with you. Ultimately, the way you treat people is the measuring stick. It's the morals that you instill in your children, the love and support you give your wife, being a loyal friend, and of course, how you interact with those less fortunate than you. I mean, really well-written, really wonderful words, Jason. But I think that dialogue between you and your dad and the advice that he's giving you, you know, and where did that come from?
Yeah, well, and that's a great passage, because my dad was very focused on making money when he was alive. And keep in mind, this is not only a book about me, this is a book of how I thought, if my dad could beam down from heaven, this is how he would be honest with himself and to me on the things that he could have done better. So he was very, very focused on finances, and he was a go-getter, and he made it happen. He made a lot of money, and he lost a lot of money. But I said to myself, I know my dad today, at the end of the day, would say, as long as you have your physical and mental health and the way you treat people, looking back on being my dad, looking back on my life, that's what's important, not the money.
Yeah. Oh, excellent points. You know what else you do well, which I love it, when you build through the book? You use music.
Yeah. Yes.
I know you grew up in the 80s, but you use these songs, and people hear songs and they get an emotional connection, and you use the titles of those songs. I don't want to give too much away.
No,
in the
that's
book,
fine. No, that's great.
Go out
that's great.
and read it. But there's 4 songs, and maybe there's more in the book, but just to catch it. So the 4 songs, we've only just begun, right? So even at this stage in your life, we've only just begun. And that's by the Carpenters, right?
Yeah. So
I'm not going to hum it, but
right. So on the cover, you'll see the jukebox. Music was very important to my father. He was a musician, and I tried to pick songs that when I went out and I interviewed people about my father, some I knew, some I didn't know, I was able to integrate certain songs on this jukebox that I knew in our interaction would trigger a memory for my father.
Yes.
And that song that you just brought up is when I start to talk about my mom, who is still alive and struggling. But I really challenge my dad in the book to tell me about her, because looking back, I never asked him, take me all the way back, Dad, to when you first met each other. What was life like then? So the song triggers my dad in the book to really kind of put all his inhibitions behind him and get to the point.
You really delve into the book, you know, like your dad at the point that he met your mom. And at a disco bar.
I got all that information. I never knew it. I asked my mom, because now that when I was writing this book, it was almost like doing research for a college paper. Mom, I've never asked you this stuff before. I need this information for my book. Bring me back to that night You know.
So that research where you had discovered your dad came through people, your mom being one, and your dad's friends
Bandmates
through
and
time.
friends and high
Bandmates. Your
school
dad was
friends.
a big band guy
Yeah.
in college. You went to Ohio State, big rah-rah school,
Yeah.
right? But in high school and college, what did you
Played-
play the guitar?
Playing the guitar, I was in bands, yep. So I kind of knew who to go reach out to get this information. And actually in that process built some great friendships with these people,
That's nice.
you know.
So other songs that you use, again, that have this emotional connection. Everyone sure knows this one. What a Wonderful World. You know, the
Yeah.
lyrics on that one. Louis Armstrong?
Yeah. That was a song that my father dedicated to my brother at his bar mitzvah. And I remember him really being connected to that song because if you, and I put the lyrics in this book because if you read those lyrics, it really represented who my father was. He always did, despite all his flaws, he always did wake up and try to see the good in the world and the good in people. And that's a song when and keep in mind, I'm playing this as I'm writing.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I'm trying to.
You have it on the jukebox.
I have it on YouTube, and I'm writing as I hear it. It's triggering emotions.
You mentioned that, I think, in your book, or did you mention to me, music inspires you and helps you write and release the words and the emotion. You do you do that? Do you have your...
I do. I'm always listening to some sort of really, something that'll trigger my emotions and take me into a different reality. For me, at least, that's what... Because I write very intimate details about my life, and in order to get to that vulnerable place, you have to get into a different frame of mind.
Yeah.
So
2 other songs that come right out. Wind Beneath My Wings.
Yeah.
People know that one.
Yeah.
Right?
That was a song when I was
Great lyrics.
even when I was a kid, back in the 80s, I would hear that song as a whatever age I was young, and I always thought of my dad, and
At the end, toward the end, you'd say, "Dad, you're my hero."
Yeah.
And he needed that too to validate that for himself, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, you end with The Living Years.
Yeah, Mike and the Mechanics. Another song that when it would come on, I knew one day that I was going to lose my father, because that's life. And that song always triggered a lot of sadness and emotion. The thought of, and again, I was a little kid listening to that for some reason. So that was the very, very last song that I play when I leave for the last time.
Yeah. So Jason, so much great advice in the book from your dad and you reflecting on that advice. Let me ask you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
So regarding that advice,
Yeah.
what was the most valuable advice? There's a lot to it. What?
Advice from the book or in real life?
No, advice from
writing it?
Advice from your dad.
Advice from so advice
Valuable.
from advice that I knew if he was alive today he would tell me.
Yes.
And you hit on it before, and it's about finding a balance, and it's about I talk to my dad in this book a lot about how I go back to my past. The Magic of Mayfair was a great time. And a lot of us go back to our past sometimes because it was such a great time, whether it be music, whether it be a fragrance, whether it be whatever it is, it triggers something in our mind, and nostalgia is powerful. And you got to find the balance and not stay there.
Yes.
Because if you stay in the past, you're not going to have new memories to go to.
Right.
So for me, the best advice, and again, it's a struggle to this day, is how do you do all of the things that you want to do? How do you accomplish all the goals? But live in the moment. And that is the most important thing. And I'm guilty as charged of, even to this day, needing to do a better job of that. But looking back at my dad's life, I know if he could come down from heaven, whatever you believe, forever you believe your loved ones are, and sit down, I believe that he would tell me, Jason, focus on what's important, and those are the people that are in your life today.
Great words, great advice. So here, ready?
Yeah.
The advice from your dad. What's the most shocking?
From this book?
Yeah, that's something that you never would have expected.
Yeah.
And that, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I'm just trying to think. I think, it was, the thing was, when my dad was alive, he really never showed emotion. And I wanted him keep in mind, this is a wish. This was a wish if I met him, how it would go. He showed emotion, and there was a time where I actually found out that I had no idea that my dad had a very short marriage before my mother. And I talk about it in the book. And I found out from this uncle who was a little spilled the beans. My dad never thought that it was something that really would make an impact at all. So, but in this, to me and my brothers, like, what's the big deal? It was 6 months. So, anyway, in this book he dives into it, but he doesn't only dive in. I do have little memories, and I try to piece it all together. But that was a tough time for him.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes to answer your question is, it's okay for us to tell our children when we're a time where we struggled.
Yes.
We always want to talk about the things, I think, by nature, the great times, the good accomplishments we've had, but I think sometimes even more meaningful in this book was several times my dad told me where he struggled, and I took away from my own writing that, I can share those times as my children get older and it becomes appropriate to give them those examples, because it shows you're human, and it shows as a parent that you have challenges, and we don't have to put on this persona of, I think of like dropping the scroll and it goes on, it's all filled with our accomplishments and great things. You can weave in there some things that maybe you're not that proud of,
right.
Or give your children advice that can help them. So when he was alive, he didn't really do it, but I incorporated it into the book, and for me that was powerful.
Very impactful for us parents to share our true selves with our kids, because as children grow up, they tend to put their parents on a pedestal, as would make sense, but to share those vulnerabilities at age-appropriate ways, I think can help really cement that wonderful lifelong relationship.
When you give advice to your children, and I'm no expert, or a friend, if you can start it off by saying, I'm telling you this because I don't want you to make the same mistake that I made, versus just saying, why would you do that, Mike? What are you thinking? Why would you do? Yeah. It's all how you phrase it and word it and share it.
Yeah. So Jason, you were given this opportunity through self-therapeutic to go back and meet your dad one more time. A little therapeutic as well as a little bit of closure. Your dad died, how old was he?
65.
65.
Yeah.
Through a car accident.
Yep.
So, and many watching may still have loved ones who are alive, parents, siblings. What advice would you give that we have, parents? My parents are in their 80s.
Yeah.
I do more and more feel blessed. Every day is a gift.
Yeah.
But what advice, you having lost your dad, what can we do?
Barring your parents doing something horrific to you, remember, most people do the best they can. And we've talked about this. As long as it's something, again, that's not catastrophic. I get it. There's some really volatile situations out there with parents and children. But assuming that it's just not that bad, most people have done the best they can. Most people aren't perfect. Don't hold grudges. Sit down and have conversations with your parents. Think about, what if my parent was no longer here? What would I want to know? And you're just spent some time with your father, which really touched me, because I knew we were going to be talking about, and really it made me feel
And your book impacted me in certain ways. I said to my dad, I'd like to take some time this summer and interview you. And take a couple hours and really get to know him through his life. And that impact.
When I saw those pictures of you with your father, it was touching. It was touching. So that would be my advice to everybody out there. No one's perfect. You're not perfect. Well, I'm not perfect. Be easy on your parents. At the end of the day, again.
Great point. Be easy on your parents.
Be easy, because being a parent is a very, and I talk about this, it's the toughest job in the world. And, at the end of the day,
we have one mom and one dad, biological.
And and that's
great advice, Jason. I thoroughly enjoyed the books. I've talked with you personally. I think how prolific you are, and 4 books in less than 2 years. What did you major in? Did you major in college in journalism? You weren't like a
No,
writer
no,
growing up, right?
No, it's funny. My mom said the other day, she's like, if you didn't lose your father, your brother didn't have this awful diagnosis,
Yeah.
you probably would never have written any books. And I said, you're probably right. I was lucky. I found my passion at 40-ish years old, 41, 42 years old. And now I'm not going to stop,
That's awesome.
I just...
You have a bunch more books in you.
I've
I have
got
a few
ideas.
books in
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So let's talk
Yeah,
about
let's-
this as we sort of move toward the end of the interview.
Yep.
You mentioned, give our audience some pointers, some tips. If I feel people have a few books in them,
Yeah.
how do they start?
Yeah.
Where do they go? Give us a little guidance on that.
Yeah, I would tell you, and it sounds so simplistic, Mike, but just start writing. Just start writing. You've got a laptop, sit down. It doesn't have to be, perfect. That's what editors and proofreaders are for. I think it's a discipline. It's sitting down, designating a certain time throughout your day. You only have to write 1 page a day, or a paragraph a day. It doesn't have to be done quick, fast. Although I've published 4 books in 2 years, these are 6-month projects. So the other thing is, we are, from a technology standpoint, so far in a different place than we were 25, 30 years ago, being able to self-publish books now. I had an agent for a children's book. My agent retired, coincidentally, after I signed with her a year later. Go figure. So I've just enjoyed self-publishing books. I've continued to do it. But there are tools and resources out there that once you've got a written manuscript, some people out there may have a written manuscript that they've had for 20 years, just sitting in a drawer, typed up from the 90s. Reach out to me. My website's treemouthbooks.com, so treemouthbooks.com. Send me a note. I've got people, if anyone's interested, I can get people hooked up with, a great cover design person, editor, proofreader. I am happy to share the resources.
Awesome.
Because I think it's amazing. I've always believed, life's about reaching back and helping somebody else. So I'm more than happy if it message me, whatever you want to do.
That's great.
Write a comment on this post.
Fantastic, Jason. Thank you again for sharing
Yeah.
your time. I have a few more questions.
Yeah,
but
and
you want to make a point?
I did want to talk a little bit about the waitress in the book.
Right.
I don't know if that was on
Yes,
your list.
yes.
Okay.
No, and
Yeah.
please do. Right.
So there's a very important character. This is a short story. So there's really 3 characters: myself, my father, and I befriend this waitress, and her name is Kathy. And she is inspired by somebody that I worked with many years ago. I'm in the retail field and had the blessing to work with this particular individual. And exactly as I wrote this character, who is just her it's light beams from her soul in this book. This was the real life kind of person that I got to know. And unfortunately, at 43 years old, I believe, we lost her to a very rare type of breast cancer. So what I wanted to do was honor her in this book. So it's a double dedication, I call it.
Yes.
A double dedication to my father and to Kathy. And for the month of July, I'm donating 100% of the proceeds to the Susan G. Komen Foundation in honor of Kathy. So I've pretty much donated all of my profits to a mental health nonprofit by the name of same here, the Global Mental Health Movement. You've met Eric Cusin, the CEO and founder of that organization. So I write books too to be able to give back. We don't, as anyone can attest out there that writes books, you don't make a lot of money per book. But whatever I do make, I really like to give that back to a charity or to a nonprofit. So I just thought that was.
And where can people buy it? It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon.
They're all selling on Amazon.
Yeah, they're all on Amazon. I believe they're all on Target.com, Barnes & Noble. I always say Barnes & Noble, dust off your gift cards that you've got in drawers, and Target, people get those for their birthdays or whatever. But yeah, really, Walmart.com, anywhere online. You can people like Amazon.
So as we wrap up, I want to ask you, so what other books you have in you? You have one, or is anything percolating for your 5th book?
I have some ideas, but what I really want to start to do is play around with writing screenplays for these. I really want to bring these to life. The Magnificent Mind of Ostaf, I mean, this one, I hope everybody gets a chance to read this. I love all the books I've
Yeah.
written, but this one, it almost reminds me of like a Tim Burton character,
Yes.
like Edward
Yeah.
Scissorhands. I think that this could be just a great film.
This could
So,
be a feature
yeah,
film
that's
too.
yeah,
This is the
man,
Wonder
yep,
Years theme.
Yep.
What was that set in the 80s? When did that show come
Wonder
out?
Years was 60s, I think.
Yeah, that was set in the 60s,
Yeah.
but when the show came out.
Oh, it was in,
in
yeah,
the
it was
80s or
80s.
90s.
Yeah, maybe.
But the recurrence of that theme,
Yeah.
bring you back to that wonderful childhood.
Yep.
That whether you've experienced yourself, but that's a universal theme.
Yeah.
That could be a screenplay in a movie, right?
Yeah, this one as well, and
Yeah.
Lunch with Larry. So that's
Yeah.
I'm going to attempt to try to teach myself how to write a screenplay.
Okay.
And
How do you
see-
learn
see-
about all this stuff, Jason? You just get on Google and
And
self.
that's a great point. You know, I tell anyone out there, it's not rocket science. There's no secret sauce.
Yeah,
If you want to figure out how to do something, just YouTube it.
yeah,
I mean, it's really that simple.
yeah.
Whether it's the program, the computer program that you need, or whatever it is, it's sometimes the answers are right in front of us.
I thoroughly enjoy this. I
My
thoroughly
pleasure.
enjoy our conversations. Everyone, thank you for watching.
I appreciate
Jason
you.
is
Yeah.
very accessible. Happy to. He said contact him at any time.
Yep.
Myself as well. Again, thank you all. If there are other ideas or thoughts that you have for future programs or other authors in town, happy to discuss and assist you and support in any way we can.
Yep. And I
So-
want to also just thank
Yeah.
everybody in Livingston. So many people,
Yeah.
have just been open arms and really supported me.
Yeah.
And thank you to everybody out there. You all know who you are. I can count on you. And with those people, we can help make a change in regards to going back to how we started.
I think we are.
Normalize conversation around life challenges. It's okay to talk about tough times.
Yes, absolutely. So I think we're all set. Everyone, have a wonderful evening and thank you for watching. And we'll see you at the next live program.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.